At the time of recording, it has been 1 week since the Season 2 finale of Severance aired. So today, I'm going to review and rank some of the recent theories and predictions from the 4 different Severance subreddits. And yes, you heard me correctly, there are 4 different Severance subreddits. If you're unfamiliar with them, here's a brief introduction in order of the sub's creation date. First, we have the largest subreddit, r/SeveranceAppleTVPlus, with 729,000 outies. This sub generally has the best theories, and they're also pretty strict with no spoilers, so it's quite a serious kind of sub. Next, we have r/SeveranceTVshow, which has 64,000 severed members. This one also has a decent amount of good theories, and they're more relaxed with spoiler posts, so I would say this is an okay sub if you're fine with being exposed to spoilers. Then we have r/Severance, and they have 103,000 outies. And yes, Severance is spelled incorrectly. This sub doesn't generally have in-depth theories, but instead has more of a casual, light-hearted kind of vibe instead. And finally, we have r/okbuddyseverance, with 27,000 cold harborists. This sub is what is known as a shitposting sub, where they basically just post about things to make fun of the show, in a light-hearted, meme kind of way. They can be kind of mean though, as some people make parody posts of genuine posts from the other 3 subs, which I don't think is cool, so those kind of posts won't be included in this video. But with that, I'm going to go over some of the posts from each one and rank them. Now, this ranking is going to be based on logic. Well, my own logic. And how well I think each theory fits into the show so far. Like, does it make sense with what we've already seen? Does it work narratively, thematically? Does it feel like something the show could actually explore in the future? And also, if I just like it. And just remember, this is all light-hearted fun. We're just here having fun.
I'm having fun.
So let's enjoy sharing some opinions, having discussions, and engaging with each other in polite ways. And this really shouldn't need to be said, but it's the internet, so I feel like I have to say it directly. There is a difference between giving your opinion and critiquing a theory versus criticizing the person who shared the theory. Critiquing a theory is of course fine. Criticizing the person behind the theory is not. So with that, the tier list, as you may have already noticed, goes S, A, B, C, and F. There is no D or E because what even are those rankings? Who even cares about them anyway? It's either C or it's an F. So let's get into it, starting with r/SeveranceAppleTVPlus. So, first theory is Cold Harbor wasn't about blocking memories, it was about blocking personality. Lumen can block memories, they have that down pat, but the severed people we've seen are never blank slates. When Irving woke up on the table, he had an existential crisis. Mark threatened to find and kill the voice on the speaker, and Helly? Her fighting back was practically the whole first season. Now we've seen Gemma in the other rooms when it seemed like she did have a personality. They had to make fake worlds for her to slot into, invent scenarios that made sense to a regular human, and give her a job that had a purpose. Gemma's 24 other innies weren't so different from the innies in MDR. Even without personal memories, they still functioned like people. But when Gemma walked into Cold Harbor, there was no crisis, no rebellion, no emotions. She didn't function like a person. She was told to do a task, and she did it without questions. That would be the holy grail for cults and companies alike, and Lumen is both. Then Mark walked in, soaked in blood, and was still able to talk her into leaving, even though the voice on the speaker told her to stay. Whether it was memories or personality or a shadow of her former self breaking through, Gemma ignored the voice giving her commands and went with her intuition. That's why James lost his shit. Cold Harbor was about making a completely obedient worker and/or acolyte through blocking personality and humanity, and it failed. So the theory is basically saying Cold Harbor was primarily about blocking personality, not about blocking memories, in order to create a completely obedient worker. And it failed because of what we saw happen with Gemma willingly going with Mark. I would say I generally agree about it being more about blocking personality out of someone so that you're left with a perfectly tamed innie. But their theory says it wasn't about blocking memories and it was solely about blocking personality, which I disagree with. I think it's a combination. I think in order to have the perfectly tamed, four tempers tamed, compliant innie, like we saw with Innie Gemma in the Cold Harbor room, you only get to that stage by refining parts of her memories, emotional reactions to memories. So I'm going to put this in A tier because I think they're correct. I do think it is more about blocking personality, but I do think blocking the emotional response to memories is the secondary component to that. So yeah, I'm putting it in A tier. I generally agree with everything they said, but I don't think they should dismiss the project being about the blocking of memories in the way that they've obviously written their title as such. So, next theory. This one says, Gemma was almost certainly not the only test subject on the testing floor. TLDR, there are 4 doors for living quarters on the testing floor, which means there probably were 3 other test subjects being refined for. For some, this might have been obvious, but the show seems to intentionally go out of its way to avoid direct evidence. So in their post, they expand on this by saying, there are 4 doors for living quarters on the testing floor. This certainly isn't an answer, but we've never seen what's actually behind these doors, but they are exactly the same as Gemma's and are all facing the same central hub around which the testing hallways are arranged. You can actually see all 3 of them in the screenshot I included. It's safe enough to assume that these either do or did house the other 3 test subjects being refined for by the rest of MDR. Theory time, the reason for the focus on Gemma as special aside from the narrative and plot reasons is probably because she is the first testing subject with a spouse as the refiner, and therefore had a higher chance of having all 25 of her innies created by someone who knows her intimately. The dramatic importance of Cold Harbor could be because no other test subject has ever made it to 25 files before. So they provided this screenshot, which is when Dr. Maurer comes to Gemma's door, and we can see the 3 doors behind him, as well as in this shot of the angle, as well as this one. So I think the first part of this post, which is about Gemma not being the only test subject on the testing floor with the screenshots provided, I think that's very compelling. I agree with their observations. As for the second part, where they say about Gemma being special, and it's probably because she's the first testing subject with a spouse as the refiner and has a higher chance of all 25, blah, blah, blah. I also agree with that, actually. I think what makes the whole thing with Mark and Gemma so unique and special is because this was the first time Lumen had a refiner working on someone who actually knew the person that they were refining. And because of that deep emotional connection, that's what contributed to Mark being able to complete Allentown in record time. And I also agree with what they're saying about the dramatic importance of Cold Harbor is because no other test subject has ever made it to 25 files before. I actually also agree with that. I agree that that's the significance of 25. Like, why 25? I think it's just a momentous occasion because this is the first time they've ever been able to get to this stage without maybe something going wrong, like by the time they maybe split the last person into 24 different innies, it just didn't work and something crazy happened. So for me, this is a solid theory post. I agree with basically everything that they said, so this is going in S tier. It all makes sense with the logic of the show. It just all adds up for me. What more can I say? S tier. So, next post. So this one says, theory, Helly R is the perfect Egan successor. TLDR, Jamie Egan is correct that Helly is the perfect Egan. Helly, Harmony, and Kir are all disruptors, and Lumen was built on disruption. So they say, the first scene between Jamie Egan and Helly in the finale of season 2 isn't just a power play, it's foreshadowing. James tells Helly that he sees Kir in her. Then she says, you've created hell and you'll burn for it. And he responds by saying, there he is. He doesn't mean she's like Kir, in spite of her hatred for Lumen. He means because of it. Here's what we know about Kir. He was born near the end of the Industrial Revolution, a time when brutal factory work was the norm. Long hours, child labor, zero protections. Kir worked in these environments. He saw the trauma firsthand. Eventually, he ended up at the ether factory where he met Imogene. That's when the seed for Lumen was likely planted. He realized he could use ether, essentially the first form of severance, to separate the suffering from the self. In his mind, he was disrupting a broken system, creating a way for people to work without bringing trauma home. The system was hell, so he rebuilt it. Kyr's ideological heir would be Harmony Cobell. Her aunt says Mr. Egan saw Kyr in you. Like Kyr, she grew up in factories. She saw the dark side of the ether industry. She knew how destructive it was as a drug, how much it hurt her community. And just like Kyr, she tried to disrupt that system, this time with a severance chip. The system was hell, so she rebuilt it. Now James Egan sees Kyr in someone new, Helly. Helly has the drive to tear down a broken system rather than accept it. To him, that rebellious spark is Lumen's true legacy. Kyr wasn't about preserving the status quo, he was about destroying it and building something new. We must be cut to heal. The system is hell and she's going to rebuild it. The last scene of the season, Helly and Mark running down the hallway and eventually becoming a painting in the classic Lumen style, isn't just artsy flair. It's a moment being canonized, another turning point in Lumen's history, immortalized like all the others. I'm conflicted about this one. I like the beginning of this when the poster says about Helly, Harmony, and Kyr all being disruptors and Lumen built on disruption. That's such a business way to see things, and it's kind of true, like you have to be a disruptor to make waves in industries, etc. But if you've seen any of my previous videos, especially the video I did for episode 9 when I was basically investigating the Egan history, I'm not so sure about Kyr Egan's past. So this whole paragraph about Kyr, I'm not super inclined to believe. And I don't think Lumen's at the point in their business operations when they need a disruptor to come in. Like, they're already pursuing the limits of the severance chip and what they can achieve with it. And that seems to be their whole primary focus. So I don't think they're going to want Helly to come in and tear it all down. And I'm thinking the whole we must be cut to heal thing, I think that's more so what they say to their workers. I don't think the Egans, Lumen, have that opinion of themselves. So with that, I'm gonna put it in C tier. I'm doing it. I think if we were looking at it purely from her father's perspective, he definitely sees her as probably the perfect Egan successor. But I don't agree with the stance they have about being a disruptor to Lumen as a company and how that would make her the perfect Egan successor. So basically, I think it would be ranked higher if this was purely just about her father's opinion in a family dynamic sense, but I just don't think I agree with it in the Lumen company sense. I don't think Helly R would be a good Lumen CEO, since she's fundamentally against everything the whole company stands for, and she's not just going to turn into some business savvy woman who's just going to be able to reinvent the wheel kind of thing. So it's in C tier. Next theory. So this one is titled, Why Has No One Mentioned This About Irving? When Mark tells Cobell that Irving was drawing the hallway to the testing floor elevator, she has a noticeable reaction and involuntary what? Knowing what we know about Cobell, that the entire season 1 she seems to be obsessed with, can something break through the barrier? She intentionally puts Mark and Gemma / Miss Casey into situations together and monitors them. She observes Outie Mark in his day-to-day life, all assumably to see if the severance would break / hold. She steals a candle to try and do her own tests on the severance floor. What if it isn't only love between a husband and wife that they are testing the limits of severance? Why is Outie Irving investigating Lumen? My theory has to do with what was in that chest. Not only did it have Lumen secrets, but also mementos of his father. What if his father is on the testing floor? That is who Irving is data refining. And Outie Irving must suspect something. He's doing whatever he can to track down missing people as well as Lumen employees, maybe even getting severed so he can be on the inside. Like Outie Mark attempted to burn images into his eyes, Outie Irving is staying awake trying to get Irving to fall asleep at work because his subconscious / sleep state is bleeding through. We also know that when Miss Casey was telling Irving his Outie facts that they are true, while being misleading. For example, your Outie loves listening to the sound of radar. We as the viewer viewer would not have initially thought that that meant his dog, but we now know this is true, while being misleading. Miss Casey also says your outie is fond of music and owns many records, but if we look at records as meaning files or notes, it could be true while not meaning music records. Also interesting that it says your outie is a friend to children and to the elderly and the insane. Maybe whoever is on the testing floor for Lumen went to them for health services, like Gemma, for any number of mental health reasons. His dad's photo showed him in a sailor uniform, so perhaps PTSD. My only other thought is if it isn't his father, maybe it's a twin brother. Still someone in his life who went missing that he had to find. And perhaps this is testing the limits of Severance with a twin. And the testing hall is bleeding through from a twin link, but they've given us more visual clues that it would be his father based on what was in his home. All this being said, I believe a much bigger part of his story is left to be told. Okay, I think this post starts out strong. I think this is an important moment, like Cobell's reaction to finding out Inimark and the MDR team know where the testing floor is. And what I'm going to take from the rest of it is that the poster is theorizing that either Irving's father or brother is on the testing floor. So that's what I'm going to be ranking. Oh, I mean twin brother. Let me add the twin in. The poster specifically said twin brother. My opinion is, I agree that Irving definitely wants to find the testing floor because there probably is someone he knows or is close to that I'm thinking was previously on it. So we've already seen that in season 2, Lumen only cared about Mark completing Cold Harbor. So the other members of MDR were already disposable. I mean, we literally started off the season with them being fired, like Dylan and Irving being fired. So that makes me think that there's no one connected to them on the testing floor. So I already think that this is a past situation thing, if it is even that. And I don't know where the twin brother stuff came from. And I'm thinking maybe his father isn't around anymore either. So purely based on what this post's core was about, that Irving's father or twin brother is on the testing floor, this has to be an F tier. I don't think either options are likely. I don't think the person Irving was refining is there anymore, and that's why they were able to fire him and get rid of him and it have no consequence. Same with Dylan and Helly. I don't think they were refining anyone either. I think Gemma, during season 2, is the only test subject on the testing floor. So yeah, just for what it is, F tier. Okay, now we're moving on to r/SeveranceTVshow, and the theories are definitely going to be significantly shorter in length. So, starting with the first theory. It is, James is going to flip Helly and Helena. Thinking about what James said, when as he put it, I don't see the fire of Keir in her anymore, but I see it in you. I can't be the only one who thinks that what this means is next season James will do something I've seen hyper-theorized here before with other characters. That James will do something that will switch the position of Helly and Helena so that Helly will be free on the outside, but actually probably on a very tight leash by James, while Helena will be trapped and regulated to the severed floor. I think it could be really interesting both because Helena will be subjected to arguably the ultimate betrayal by her father and will be forced to be on equal ground with the innies that she looked down on, while Helly will be subjected to the scrutinizing, toxic abuse James subjected Helena to and realize that Helena wasn't much more free than she was. I don't know, it would just be very interesting, walk a mile in each other's shoes moment for both of them. Okay, I think they're half correct. I don't know if it's going to be a direct switch, like 1-for-1 with Helena now being on the severed floor, because even though it was different circumstances, we've already seen that, and we would just basically be seeing it again, but instead of her pretending to be Helly, it would just be herself, and it would be somewhat of a repeat, but just different, and I just don't think they're going to do that. I think it's more likely that James will offer Helly to replace Helena in the outside world, but I don't think Helena is going to replace Helly. So I'm going to put this in B tier because, like I said, I think it's partly going to happen, but not in the way that this poster has theorized. So I would say it's only partly true with Helly replacing Helena on the outside. So B tier. Next post. This one says, is this painting the key to season 3? And the painting is of the Mark completing Cold Harbor with everyone standing around him. And they say, in Severance, every detail matters, and this painting seems to have a much deeper meaning than we realize. To me, it represents the people Mark has been connected to in one way or another, but not just in a literal sense. It could be a clue that season 3 will explore something much bigger, the true nature of Lumen's experiment. If the simulation theory is correct, then is Mark the experiment? Could his entire journey have been designed to reach a specific outcome? Season 2 left us with major unanswered questions, but I'm convinced that the first episode of season 3 will finally deliver the plot twist we didn't get before. So they're saying the plot twist is that Mark is the experiment this whole time because it's a simulation. I did say these were going to be shorter posts, but I think in this case, we needed some more information. We needed to see how you connected these dots. I have many follow-up questions. But this post is obviously saying the painting of Cold Harbor is foreshadowing season 3, Mark being the experiment, with it being a simulation theory. This, for me, is F tier. I don't believe in any simulation kind of theory. I think these characters are definitely existing in the world. And I don't really still understand how the Cold Harbor painting links to it being a simulation theory with Mark being the experiment. So maybe that's on me for not understanding completely, but it's an F tier. Next post. So, this one says, Color Theory Season 2 Finale. I was thinking about the finale and the show's consistent use of color theory, which has been applied in a really striking way. Something in particular caught my attention. Typically, red is associated with the outie world, while blue represents Lumen and the severed innie flaw, right? But in the scene where Mark S talks to Mark Scout, the colors seem to be inverted. The innie is in front of the fireplace, bathed in red, while the outie is outside in blue. Do you think this could symbolize the current rebellion, foreshadowing the innie's uprising? Or maybe it reflects a shift in control, suggesting that agency is now more in the hands of the innie, with his decisions shaping what happens next. Straight off, I have to say, I love this. This person, they are noticing the color details and making sensible conclusions from it. And I'm inclined to believe them, actually. And something they didn't include, but what could be added onto this, right, is how the ending of episode 10 ends with Innie, Mark, and Helly on the severed floor, but bathed in the red lighting, and then how it fades to an all-red end screen. So this is more of that, the red color is now the severed floor. It's now on the severed floor. It now is the severed floor. So overall, I love this. It makes sense. It works with the show. It works with everything that the show has told us about in terms of like the color theory stuff and the power dynamics of innie and outie. I agree with their final conclusion about maybe it's reflecting foreshadowing of a shift in control and that the innie is now the main decision maker, the one in control of the physical body, like specifically for innie Mark. And I think it also does potentially show that the innie uprising will happen because the innies are now the ones in control. So this is a straight up S tier. I love it. Next theory. Okay, we've got an interesting one here, guys. We have, could the water in Kier PE prevent pregnancies? There are already theories that Lumen wants to produce babies along with all the baby symbolism. Supporting evidence. Gemma drank the water, miscarried. Devon, who was able to have a child, drinks only Lumen blue filtered water. She has connections with Rickon, who is able to access the Lumen birthing retreat and may have more information. Lumen also runs the pregnancy clinic, which they could use to select people for testing/severing. Against Dylan's children, unless there is more to it or Lumen implemented this more recently. Also, Dylan's wife works as a police officer in a Lumen town, who likely may have collaborated with Lumen in Gemma's death. She was also trusted enough to access the severed floor, it's possible she knew about the water as well. There would be a noticeable rise in miscarriages in Keir PE, although we don't really know what the people of the town are like. It could just be individuals trusted by Lumen who are informed about this, which in that town could be a lot. This may be a recent thing they wish to implement. I understand the theory is weak, however, I think there is something suspicious about Devon's water filter. I'm just not sure what. Let me start with the pros of this theory. There's definitely something to do with water in this whole show. Like Lumen being by the water tower, them having that giant body of water behind the Lumen building that's shown prominently in that animation video they made for the innies. And since they have control over the whole of Keir PE, it seems plausible that they would have control over the water supply. But then it's connecting that to preventing pregnancies. You know, I'm going to put this in C tier. I think it makes sense in terms of all the water connections to Lumen and the fact that they do have control over the whole of Keir PE. But I'm not sure if the connection is preventing pregnancies. So this is another one of those half type theories where like half onto something, half maybe not. Maybe the connections are a bit crossed. And I mean, the poster already listed out their pros and cons. And obviously, we've already seen kids, Dylan's kids, that exist. As well as we've now found out about Jaime Egan having all these like secret Egan offspring. So maybe we could expand their theory. Maybe they're doing some sort of birth control in the water and being selective with who drinks it. Something like that, maybe. I don't know. I don't want to, make these theories more plausible or whatever. So let's just put it in C tier and move on. So next theory. This one just says, my theory, Bran is the Night King. And that's it. I'm going to put Bran is the Night King in, it can go in B tier for Bran. B for Bran. So now we're on to R/Severance, with it spelt with an E and not with an A. So, first theory. This one says, Lumen is full of shit. The people who manage Lumen, like Harmony, Milchick, and the Egans, like to portray themselves as all-knowing and cerebral individuals who have a firm grasp on their jobs. But what if they just don't? Milchick butchered the pronunciation of that Swedish word I'm not even going to try to pronounce, made a fake newspaper, and lied about a whole bunch of other stuff like the waterfall being the tallest. Drummond doesn't seem to be that great at his job, given that he didn't know where Mark was on the day that Cold Harbor was supposed to be completed. Milchick even pointed this out. Helly even mentioned in season 1 that they don't seem to be that great at supervising people, and this was proven by the fact that they were able to pull off the OTC without anyone inside the building noticing. Maybe in this universe, Lumen is thought of in the same way that Scientology is thought of. A bunch of crazy cultists who portray themselves as something they're not. There's so many theories flying around that overanalyze every detail, but maybe the simplest explanation is the best one. Lumen just isn't that great of a company, and the people running it aren't as smart as they make themselves out to be. Also, I cannot be the only one who listens to anything Keir says and thinks, here's a guy who's definitely trying to make himself sound smarter than he actually is. So their whole theory is obviously Lumen is just full of and maybe there's no point in overanalyzing every detail because the answer to everything is that the company is just incompetent. I'm going to put this in A tier. I think the company definitely portrays itself to be, let's say, better than it actually is. Its workers being more competent than they actually are. But I think that's just the same for literally every single company, organization that exists ever. And since their post was kind of insinuating that we shouldn't overanalyze everything because it all just comes back to Lumen being incompetent, I don't 100% agree with that. So that's why it's going in A tier, not S tier. Because they do clearly still have a purpose and there is still a bigger story at play than them just being a poorly ran company. So it's an A tier. Next theory. This one simply says, Irv theory. I think Irv was a failed version of Gemma. Optics and design talk about how they used to have a guy who'd bring the designs down to the testing room, which I believe to be Irv. And when Gemma arrived and MDR was formed to refine Gemma, they resevered him. But when he was severed again, his memories of his optics and design self start to merge with his MDR self and his outie, which explains why he sees the hallway. I'm afraid we may have encountered another post where I need more information to understand the connections that are being made. We start off with Irv being a failed version of Gemma, and him being the guy that used to take the O&D designs to the testing room floor, which could make sense, but then the entirety of O&D would recognize him unless everyone got clean slated. And if Irv was a testing floor subject, why would they decide to create an innie of him to go and get supplies from O&D to then bring them back down to the testing floor when it's those very same supplies that seem to be used in the rooms for his other innies? So we're just going to judge it on the top line of the theory that Irv was a failed version of Gemma. I'm putting this in F tier. I'm pretty sure every single subject that was, well, I can't say that with certainty, right? We don't know. But for me, I'm under the impression that every test subject that has been down on the testing floor has died. I think the whole thing is they're testing how many separate innies it will take to make this fully compliant version. And either the chips, the brains of the subjects can't handle it, they malfunction, which leads to their death. Or, which I think was going to be the case for Gemma, if they thought that Cold Harbor worked and they had a fully compliant innie, they were going to kill her because they needed to extract the chip, because we've seen that the chips have like an arrow attachment on them. So just like with a bow and arrow, you can't just like pull the arrow out of their brain. It's stuck there forever. So the only way to extract the chip is for them to obviously be dead. So as it is, I don't think Irv can be a failed version of Gemma, because I think every testing floor subject dies, basically. So I don't know how he would be out and about and alive and stuff. So let's move on to the next post. This one also simply just says, I have a pretty good theory on what season 3 will be about. The next season is going to be about the inmates running the asylum. The innies will experience power for the first time in their lives and run the severed floor. Milchick will be a prisoner. Some role reversals will happen. Gemma will be our window to the outie world now that Mark has sequestered himself to the severed floor. You know, I like this theory. It's good, it's clean, it's simple, it makes sense. I don't know how long it will last for though, because Lumen, the building, the company, still have complete control over the severed floor as a whole. Like, the severed floor is just in a basement. Like, it's not going to have any ripple effects to the rest of the building, really. It's all just going to be self-contained to itself. But it's that thing of how long can it last? How are they going to get food? And how are they going to survive down there? But I think at least for the first couple of episodes, this works and it makes sense. And I like the Gemma being our window to the outie world now. So I'm going to put this in S tier. Because it all makes sense, it seems logical, it fits within the show, I can see it happening. Like I said, only for a short period of time though can I see it happening. So now we're moving on to the final subreddit, maybe the highly anticipated of all. We're going to r/okbuddyseverance. So, first post, we saw the beehive function in the finale. Theory. The beehive function has been such a mystery since season 1. One might argue it's the biggest question of the entire season. It was discreetly answered in the season 2 finale. The beehive function is the merriment department. Activating this switch activated the marching band performance, activated marching band members from the Beyoncé marching band from her Baychella performance. Her fans, known as the Bayhive, but for obvious copyright reasons, they could not use that spelling. And then we've got an image attached which shows the Beehive function, Beyoncé with a marching band performers, Milchick with the marching band performers, and again, the marching band performers. So the theory is Beehive is the merriment department. I'm just going to say it kind of makes sense. I'm kind of on board with it. So I'm putting it in A tier. It makes sense. I don't necessarily think it's amazing show-stopping, but it makes sense. So A tier it is. Next theory. This one says, Season 3 prediction, minis. We all know that Severance is a comedy. So imagine all the mischief, misadventures, and shenanigans that 1 centimeter tall innies, aka minis, could embark on. The law. Our 4 favorite refiners find the minivator, a mini elevator, and upon entering are transformed into minis. There could even be a mini milkshake that gets trapped under the coffee machine and dies. Also, with the mini technology, Ragabi could simply shrink down and crawl into Mark's brain and finally complete the reintegration surgery. I believe that this will be how the reintegration plot will be wrapped up in season 3. I mean, the lore section, they've given us some very compelling potential storylines. The minivator, the mini elevator, getting a mini milkshake, the mini Ragabi shrinking down to crawl into Mark's brain and complete the reintegration surgery. I mean, that's some pretty compelling theory crafting. I'm gonna put this one in B tier. I maybe, unfortunately, quite like the idea. I think if the poster had expanded on it and given some more additional details for how this might look in season 3, like where would the storyline end up? Are they going to be minis forever? What's going to happen? Also, is the 1 centimeter a final decision? Is there room for maybe changing their heights a bit? 1 centimeter just seems maybe a bit too small, but obviously we need Ragabi to be able to fit into Mark's brain hole. I'm just gonna leave it in B and move on now. So now we're at our final theory post, and we have, what's your theory on the identity of Ko? To me, it sounds like a clown name. Ko the clown was probably supposed to be in the band performance. And we've got the screenshot of the nurse lady from the testing floor saying to Mark, "Step off." And the top comment says, first name, last name O, whoever it is, they've got to be an innie. The combination of the top comment and the post, it all makes sense. O is an innie who might be maybe a clown in the band performance. And this woman is just saying, "Step off, O." I mean, it all makes sense. So with that, I'm going to put O equals O in S tier. Like I said, it makes sense. It makes sense within the show's logic, and I love it, so I'm putting it in S tier. So there you go. Those were a collection of recent post-season 2 Severance Reddit theories that I shared my thoughts on and ranked accordingly. But let me know in the comments if you agreed with my rankings, or if you completely disagree. Tell me what you think about the theories I went over, the theories themselves, and what rankings you'd give them instead. And if you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like, and if you want to see more videos from me, feel free to subscribe if you want, no pressure. And that's it. That's the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
Board has concluded the call. Yes.